Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another installment of Hope College, the virtual version, right? We're also used to being on screens, but we're just so happy you could join us tonight. We've got a fun night planned. We're going to talk about one of my favorite and what I believe is one of the most influential and impactful programs at Hope College. It's called the Phelps Scholars Program. And it's something that I always wished that I had when I was at Hope. I graduated in 1999 and did not have a chance to do the Phelps Scholars Program, but have enjoyed my participation and my involvement in it through the years. On behalf of the Hope College admissions staff, we'd like to welcome you. My name is Lance Pello, and as I mentioned, I am a Hope grad. I'm also a recruiter here in the admissions office, and I'm going to be your host for tonight. Although you don't really want to hear from me, you want to hear from the people who are actively involved in the Phelps Scholars Program. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring our director in with me, a friend and colleague, Casey Stevens. Let's get him to jump on board. There he is. Hey, Casey, good to see you, buddy. How are you?
Lance, good to be with you. Doing well.
Good. Well, hey, we've got a fun night. I know this is what you live on a day-to-day basis here at Hope, Casey, and we're super excited to let the folks who've joined us know more about the Phelps Scholars Program. I'm sure for many families, they're starting to get postcards, emails, text, phone calls about PSP. That's what we call it around here. We put acronyms on everything. But PSP is something that is near and dear to your heart. Well, first, let's get to know you, Casey. I'm jumping right into it, and let's get to know you. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your story and how you ended up at Hope.
Yeah. Thanks, Lance, for the introduction. My name is Casey Stevens. At Hope College, I'm the director of the Phelps Scholars Program. Everywhere else, I'm anybody else right now, I'm in my basement, and I'm dad, and Casey, the husband, as well. So. I grew up in a small town, White Cloud, Michigan, little one stoplight, one high school town. Not many folks around me ended up going to college, and those of us who did, not many of us ended up graduating. And during my time as an undergrad, I didn't even really know of places like Hope when I was looking for schools. And during my time as an undergraduate student, I was at Central Michigan, a very kind of different experience, but one that was so transformative for me that my paradigm was completely shifted. The way that I understood the world was shifted by the experience of being a college student, so much so that I wanted to be part of creating these types of opportunities like the Phelps Scholars Program for other folks. So kind of through a journey that of working with students in an admissions process and working in residence life, I ended up learning about the Phelps Scholars Program. And being drawn to Hope. So that's kind of a little bit about my professional journey. I have my undergraduate degree is in human development and family studies. So I've always really loved learning about people and the way that we operate in the context in which we exist and how we experience community and belonging and relationship dynamics. And then I have my master's degree in higher education and student affairs as well. I'm trying to think is there anything else, Lance, that you would want to?
It's quite a bit, Casey. I
Okay.
mean,
all right.
Yeah. And I do like that you led with, husband, father, right?
Yeah.
Like that also takes up a lot of your time. So
Yeah.
we're excited that you're with us tonight. And, certainly I'm a little biased. I love this program. I'm the liaison in the admissions office for the Phelps Scholars Program, but we've had some really cool leaders of the Phelps Scholars Program through the years, from Chuck Green to Yoli Vega, and now Casey. These are amazing people. If you are thinking about coming to Hope and you are thinking about doing the Phelps Scholars Program, this man who's on the screen with me tonight will be involved in your life directly if you do the Phelps Scholars Program. And even those who don't, right? I love that the Phelps Scholars Program is one that brings people from the outside of PSP into the community as well. So I'm just super excited that we get to hang out tonight, Casey, and talk about the things that you and I both love.
Yeah.
So Phelps Scholars Program, as an admissions officer, I love this time of year when students are starting to make decisions and they're trying to figure out, well, should I get involved with the Phelps Scholars Program? Hey, by the way, is that a scholarship? Can I get that Phelps scholarship? I see that that's happening. So it's always great to put a definition or at least an explanation to what PSP is. In your own words, Casey, can you describe the Phelps Scholars program for us?
Yeah, it's a community. It's a learning community. It's a living community. So when I think about what we do best, regardless of what changes on a year-to-year basis, the one thing that stays the same every year in the program is that students come to Hope College and into the Phelps Scholars program from across the state of Michigan, from across the country, and from across the world. And even if they don't agree on everything, they tend to find a community and a place of belonging. That's what drew me to the program when I was even interviewing for this job. And since I've been here, the thing that has been the most compelling to me has been the sense of belonging that folks have in it. And that is a testament that I've seen true from talking to my colleagues. I just asked some of them last week, where have you experienced belonging? And to a T, all of them, which was incredibly flattering, have said just the chance to work on this team, right? And when I ask students, freshmen to seniors, where have been the places that you've experienced the greatest sense of belonging and connectedness on campus, whether it's directly saying it was in Phelps Scholars or it's a result of the relationships that I built, that's it. So first and foremost, we're a community. Now, what we're doing in that community is we're having really intentional conversations about all of the things that make us who we are, right? So we are going to explore the complexities of race and culture and community. We're going to have some challenging conversations. We're also going to have conversations that I hope are incredibly supportive, where students can feel seen and known and heard, where people can have a sense of belonging. One of my favorite kind of mottos about Phelps Scholars is that we can be an alternative version of community where difference does not equal division. And so we can explore these things and still have a sense of connectedness amongst each other while we're doing it. So what do? You take a class together. You take two classes. They're classes that are part of your general education requirements at Hope. So one of them is every student comes into Hope and you all take a first year seminar class. And you just take ours, right? So you take first year seminar with other Phelps Scholars. And then you also take a class during your spring semester of your freshman year that focuses on issues related and discussions about race and culture and ethnicity in the United States, the context of the states as well. You also live together. So almost all of our Phelps Scholars live in Scott Hall. There's about 100 students who live in there, including our RAs and some other leaders in the building. And then there are all of our first year students, almost all of them live in Scott Hall as well. And then we do some off-campus trips, right? So Friday, we are going to the Holocaust Memorial Center in Chicago, and we're going to do 2 tours while we're there. We're gonna do a Holocaust Memorial tour and learn a little bit more about the Holocaust, and then we're also going to do a second tour. We're gonna have a guided tour about the exhibition, an exhibition of, called Stonewall, about the Stonewall uprising and LGBT plus activism in the history of the United States, right? And so regardless of what a person believes or how they feel, we're gonna have some intentional conversations about why is this important? What is the overlap in our society? How does this deal with me? What is my involvement here? How can I be a better human, right? And so that's one example of the trips that we'll do. And then we also have a number of workshops and events that we have throughout the year. So from professionalism and giving a professional presentation to the one that we have next is called Life After Scott Hall. So our sophomores that are getting ready to transition out of, our freshmen who are getting ready to transition into their sophomore year. So the Phelps Scholars program is a 1-year program. How do I go out of this really, hopefully rich experience and wonderful living environment? And we're not perfect, but I do think we do those 2 things well. And live in other communities and be a leader there to serve and lead in those places and to find belonging there as well. So yeah, those are some examples. So class, off-campus trips, living together, and also just kind of getting some professional and personal development together.
In the history of Hope College, I'm not sure there's a more important program. I think for a school that really is moving, as our president often says, from a place where you feel welcome, to a place where you feel like you belong. I couldn't think of a better program to challenge students not only to think of different perspectives, but to value those perspectives. And the one thing I know about the Phelps Scholars that I've been engaged with through the years, working here for close to a decade, is that they're culture contributors. They are taking a lot of this in, but they're giving back. And I love this program because you are teaching them to understand and respect different opinions, different cultures, different communities, but you're telling them you're all part of one community, the Hope College family, that's moving forward and helping others learn about these unique differences that we have. And I'll just share one quick story because we really got to get to the students. They're the ones that are doing the amazing work and really involved in making a difference here at Hope. But several years ago, I went with the Phelps Scholars on a trip. Michael Brown, who's the assistant director, personally invited me, said, "Hey, Lance, we're going to go to the south side of Chicago to Barack Obama's home church." This is when he was in office. "Will you join us?" And of course I said yes. Great Sunday morning. Service was amazing. And the trip was great. Great food, great atmosphere, great involvement. But my favorite part of the trip was sitting on the bus and listening to 17 and 18-year-old young men and women talk about race and faith life and politics and where our world has been and where our world is now. And certainly when I was 17 or 18 as a freshman at Hope College, I wasn't thinking about any of that. As I often joke, I was hoping that there was pizza and crab legs at the cafeteria that night, which is good, by the way. But wow, what an amazing experience for me to be in my mid-30s and do this and finally have that aha moment that we need more students to do this. So thank you, Casey, for your leadership. Thank you for your personal involvement and for forming relationships with each and every one of your students. Which reminds me, let's meet them. Let's bring in some of those students. And these are all students I know, students I appreciate and I really enjoy. So we're going to bring in Andrew and Arlie and Amadou into the screens here so everybody can meet them. There is Andrew and Miss Arlie, and Amadou will be here very soon. Thank you guys for joining us. I'm sure you're busy. You probably don't have 45 minutes to spend with us, but you're doing it anyway, and we appreciate that. And there he is. There's Amadou. Hey, I'm gonna turn it over to Casey. Casey's gonna introduce you guys, and certainly we're gonna learn all about you and your time here at Hope.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll start with Andrew. Andrew, why don't you come on in and tell us where you're coming from, where home is for you? I'd love to know from all three of you where home is for you, if you have a major, what it is, and kind of what initially drew you to Hope College. And we'll start with Andrew.
Hey guys, my name is Andrew Salagi. I am from Arlington Heights, Illinois, and I'm a secondary English education major with a history minor. And I initially came to Hope partially because of my brother who graduated from here in 2020. He loved this school and I had a strong connection and I got to visit him here, and I really kind of fell in love with the community and the campus when I was here with him. So
Thanks, Andrew. Arlie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I am from Highland Park, Illinois, but I just moved, so now Vernon Hills. I am now a nursing major, just got my acceptance like last week. Woo. And what was the last? Oh, what drew me to Hope? It kind of just fit all the boxes. It's a small community, that religious aspect that I was looking for, and also Phelps Scholars. So.
How about you, Amadou?
Hi, everybody. My name is Amadou. I'm from Maryland. I'm a philosophy and psychology double major. And in terms of what drew me, I'd really say it was the community. Before coming to visit home, I really wanted to go to a super big school, but I came and visited and I saw the power of community and the power of genuine community. And I knew that this was a place for me, no doubt.
Thank you all so much for sharing. So just for the sake of kind of consistency in conversation and not being too jumping all around, and we'll maybe go in that same order. And I'll start with Andrew again, and would love to hear kind of related to how you decided to choose Hope, but how did you hear about Phelps Scholars specifically? And once you heard about it, what made you decide to apply and then participate in the program?
Again, like I said, my brother went here, but he was not a Phelps Scholar. But I remember one of our mutual friends, Jillian Chang, she was a Phelps Scholar, and she went to church with me. And I remember one time visiting, and I was like, you know what, I want to check out Scott and hear about what the Phelps Scholars program is like. So she gave me a tour of the building, and I was like, you know what, like this is something I'm thinking about. I wasn't totally sure. And then eventually I got a call from Michael Brown, the program coordinator, as well as Houston Patton, who was an alumni of the program. And they sort of answered a lot of my questions about the program and just told me what it was like. And after everything that had happened in 2020, I was really interested in kind of learning more about some of these issues. And I was like, let's take a risk and let's try this program out. And I took a leap of faith and joined the Phelps Scholars community.
What are Andrew? What are some of the things what were some of your favorite parts about being in the community?
One of my favorite parts of the community was just a shared affinity for having conversations about tough issues, whether that be race and ethnicity, culture, sort of global issues, but also tying faith into that as well. And even though everybody kind of comes from a different perspective, I think for the most part, people are asking these questions and having these conversations in a way that some people might avoid or ignore in other places. And I really loved that. And I love the intentionality of some of these conversations and relationships I was able to build, even within some of the first few weeks and first semester of my experience at Hope. And a big part of it too was just the international community as well. And so many of these international students that were in PSP that I was able to build relationships with and kind of hear their perspectives.
Andrew, I was going to ask you this in a minute, but it's a perfect segue. So one of the things that stands out to me about you and having the chance to get to know you a little bit is you are really interested in talking about big ideas, right? Like even when you're not there, if I'm talking to somebody about Phelps Scholars, sometimes I refer to you. I don't know if you know this or not, but I'll say like the Scott Hall is one of those places where you might be in the basement having a 3 a.m. conversation, right? And last year, that 3 a.m. conversation, there's a really good chance that it would have been with Andrew. Right? And just kind of talking about some of life's bigger questions is something that you get excited about and you're interested in. But something I've noticed is you don't just get stuck in those questions for the sake of intellectual exercise, but you're also incredibly relational, right? And you have meaningful relationships and with friendships with people as well. And so would you share a little bit about what are some of the ways that your experience in Phelps Scholars has impacted your relationships and involvements in other areas across campus?
Yeah, so kind of going along that, getting involved with the international community and a lot of the MSOs has been something that I've definitely kind of transitioned into after being a Phelps Scholar. Specifically, my roommate now, Brian, he's an international student from Rwanda, and just kind of building a relationship with him that was centered around faith, but also really having this multifaceted kind of global international understanding of what Christianity was really interesting for me. And that kind of poured over into a lot of other relationships, both with international students and just other students that may be of color or have different experiences with their faith. And that's been really interesting for me to build those friendships and having conversations. And another example I would say that kind of goes off that is Amadou here. One time I have a radio show on campus, and one time I had Amadou on my radio show, and we kind of just talked about philosophy and religion and just like what that looks like. And we have definitely different perspectives, but it was really cool to just have a discussion about that. And it kind of stemmed all from us being in the same wing and being in Scott Hall together.
Awesome. Very good.
Hey,
I don't
I'm
know
with
yet.
you, Casey. Anytime I talk about PSP too, like Andrew's name comes up. It's easy to do, and I also feel like PSPers are the ones that when I have a prospective student who's interested in learning more, once a PSPer, always a PSPer. So they always love to talk to students about their experience or what it might be like. And I love that Andrew said he took a leap of faith, because sometimes that's what you need to do when you're curious about something, you take that leap of faith, and Andrew's a perfect example of how it pays off. And hey, just before you get to Arlie, I forgot to mention, if anybody watching has questions, if something Andrew says, or Casey, or Arlie, or Amadou says, put it in the chat box, put it in the Q&A. Send us those questions and answers. We'll have some time at the end to get through those as well.
Arlie, how did you hear about Phelps Scholars? And after you heard about it, what made you decide to apply and then participate?
Yeah, so I actually heard it from my admissions rep. As I was applying, she's like, Arlie, this is the perfect program for you. And so that's when I did my own research, because I know some people got calls, but I didn't. So I went on the website and I got those photos. I went through the Instagram, I went through the Facebook, I went everywhere just to do my own research. And everyone looked like they have so much fun. And all the people that I talked to, they said that they immediately found friends, that everyone just had good things to say. So I was like, you know what, why not? And so I immediately applied. And then I actually had my roommate who was looking at the time for a roommate, and she reached out to me and I was like, you should join the Phelps program too. So then I let her to join as well. So in that way is how I found the Phelps Scholar community.
I know a lot about you all, but I don't always know who you live with. Who's your roommate?
A Jade O'Brien. I don't know if you know her.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I was
That's
like,
great.
you need to join. And she was like, okay.
I love that. That's so great. I love how that connection was made. What's been your favorite part about Phelps Scholars so far?
Definitely the friendships I've made. And I think you noticed that during class as well. I have never met a group of girls more humble, more kind. We're all from different backgrounds, but the fact that we're people of color and a part of the Phelps program has let us have these very intense and deep conversations about race that we necessarily didn't have to think about before until coming on campus. And so I love those girls and I love those friends that I made. So definitely my favorite part of being in the building and in the program.
Awesome. I know I was talking with Arlie about some of her friends earlier. So 2 things about Arlie. First is I try to have a number of one-on-one meetings with students throughout the fall semester, just to kind of see how they're adjusting and how things are going. And time after time, I would ask, who are you friends with, right? Like, who are your people? If you have a bad day, if you have a good day, who do you know you can talk to? And the amount of people who said Arlie, right, was just off the wall. So, but not surprising as I get to know her. And the second piece of that is Arlie also just repeatedly talks about these women, right? And so it's been really fun for me to see folks who I was like, I thought maybe they were quiet, and Arlie's like, no, Vanessa's not quiet. She's gonna fill it up, right? So, so it's been really lovely to see that happen too. Arlie, as a first-year student, you shared a little bit about, I found friends right away, right? I've got this group of women who's been really important in my life. Whether it's that or whether it's something else, would you talk a little bit more about how the program has helped you acclimate and transition to your first year in college?
Yeah, so this is like one of the main stories that I always tell, but the reality is that Hope is a really white dominant institution. There's no doubt about that. It's true, it's a fact. So it's definitely harder for people of color to, find that sense of belonging. And that was my experience. The first 3 weeks were incredibly hard. I cried every single day. I cried to my mom. I cried to Casey. I called my scholarship program that has helped me be here at Hope, and I said, I'm ready to transfer. I was ready, and they were like, just give it time, give it a year. And it was because of the events that Phelps Scholars have, some that are mandatory, that I had to leave my room. I met those friends and I've met incredible people, and I can genuinely say how much I love Hope now. I love Phelps Scholars, and if it wasn't for Phelps Scholars, I truly don't think I would be here. I'd probably be back at another school. So I genuinely can say that Phelps is like my home away from home. As soon as I'm done with classes, I'm eager to go back and see my friends. And I don't know, it's just a family, in other words.
And Arlie, that's on purpose too, right? Like, I don't know if we've talked about this, but like the events are required, they're mandatory because we know they work, right? And I say that humbly, but I also say that with evidence that we design our programming, and the model and the way that we go about doing it because research and evidence says this makes a really big difference on helping students to be at their best on campus, right? We also do it because we want to have fun and we want to see you enjoy your experience. We want to see you make friends. We want to see you develop these really formational ways of thinking and higher levels of thinking. But we also know, hey, these are all things I would love for students to be doing anyways when they come to college, right? I would love for you to be involved in community service. I'd love for you to take classes around really engaging and challenging topics and to experience things off campus, right? What does it mean to find community in a place outside of your life experience and background, right? So those are all things I think students should really be aspiring toward, but we add some structure to it. And we try to do it in a way that complements where you're coming from. And I use complement, I guess, interchangeably there, right? That adds value to where you're coming from, but that also works alongside of it, right? And is conscious of your story and those support systems. So I'm glad it's really cool for me to hear you talk about my support system back home. Also was balancing what was happening on campus. So
And I
Amadou.
also have to say, Arlie, thank you for being vulnerable. Like I think there are moments where students try to put up this tough facade where, oh yeah, I'm doing fine. To say that you wanted to leave, like that's not uncommon. And the first question, I don't know if you can see that, Arlie, in the Q&A, but the first question is, how is it being a person of color at Hope? Like, it's not easy. And I'm the white guy saying that, right? Like, I don't even know what it's like. But to hear you say that, to hear that PSP was one of the things in the community that was created for you as a woman of color, to feel, once again, not that you couldn't acclimate and not that you had to assimilate to life at Hope. You could be who you were, and you could be accepted and you could find community. It's not easy at a PWI, predominantly white institution, for students of color, but the Phelps Scholars program is one of those things, one of many things, from back home to on campus, that help you find your people, your community, here at Hope. So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that.
I echo that as well. Amadou, how did you hear about Phelps Scholars and what drew you to apply and then participate?
Yeah, so one of my closest friends, Jacob, he's a year above me, and he did the Phelps Scholars program, and when he came over here to Hope, we would call each other like, I don't know, twice a week or something, and then he'd always have some story of some sort of adventure that was going on, either outside of Scott or inside of Scott. And so yeah, that was how I first got introduced to it. And then my admissions rep, Carrie Olish, she told me about the program and recommended me for it. So I said, why not?
I love hearing about your connections to people on campus, right? Like knowing Jacob before you got here, I didn't know that y'all were friends. And even Andrew, you and Jillian was one of my favorite students, right? So that's awesome. Amadou, what's been your favorite part so far?
Without a doubt, it's definitely been the intentional conversations. Like for me, towards the end of my senior year at high school, when I really started getting into philosophy, I started really seeing the value of intentional conversation in the ways that not only the way it impacts you, but impacts others around you, and the way that it gives you an understanding of yourself and the world around you. So definitely, like, I think you alluded to it and Andrew alluded to it as well, just the 3 a.m. conversations that would go on till like 6 in the morning when you have a 9 a.m. Definitely just learning more about myself and expanding my worldview as well has been the best part.
As somebody who teaches a couple of classes on campus, we see your timestamps when you turn in homework. And when I see a 3 a.m. timestamp, I'm like, oh Lord, you guys really need to go to sleep. Get some rest, take care of yourselves. So, hey, so it's really cool, Amadou, to hear you as somebody who loves thinking big thoughts and having, these intentional conversations. What's something that you have been in your Phelps Scholars experience, one thing that you learned that surprised you?
I would say just the maturity of students to be willing to take conversations you have in the classroom and make those into hour-long conversations. Like, for me at least, my high school experience was not rich with those kind of deep intellectual conversations. So it was a really big surprise for me to see that there are like-minded people and people who are able to expand on deep topics at this age. Like I think Lance was saying he was surprised when he was on that bus and there were 17, 18-year-olds talking about such deep topics. So that was interesting to me. And then I'd say I also learned more about just the complexities of race. Being a person of color and living, I'd say most of my life in areas that have been relatively diverse, I still didn't know as much as I learned when I became a Phelps Scholar. Just not only the way race applies to the individual, but the way it applies to those who perceive different races, and just like the drastic impact this has on people's lives, for sure.
So I have to say, I think, we have 4 goals in Phelps Scholars. We want students to get off to a great start. We want you to learn about the world and its people. We want you to succeed in college and in life. I think we have talked about those 3 things really well. The one thing that we haven't talked about, we've hit at it some, but our 4th goal is to have fun along the way. And so I want to make sure we don't miss that. I have a tendency to also kind of lean into some of those deeper things, but one of the things that stood out to me when I think about my experience with this program is that fun is often either a byproduct of this focus that we have, or it's something that we just do intentionally, right? And we can lean into it. We eat good food. We go to places that people enjoy, right? So, talk to me a little bit about what have been some of the most fun memories or experiences that you've been able to have, and then we'll jump into some Q&A from the chat.
Yeah, I'd say they're kind of broken up into two, in my experience at least, they've been broken up into two kind of wings. There's the kind of things that go on in Scott Hall, like you said, that are not necessarily structured, but that just end up happening. And then the things that are required of the Phelps Scholars. So a good example would be like last year, seeing Andrew in my wing and just having a great conversation out of nowhere, even though that was unintended, or just the little events that RAs would put on and having good conversation there, and just having an overall good time. And then in terms of the structured things, the things that we're required to do, um, a good one would be the last one we did, the ice skating, where I had no clue what I was doing, but that's just a little taste of what goes on.
The amount of times that somebody leaves an event and they say, quote unquote, wow, that was actually pretty good. I don't mean that for that to be a brag on ourselves. It's usually the result of the people who are coming and speaking and joining us, our guests, and kind of experts on different topics. But you kind of hear the same quotes every year from students who really enjoyed and got a lot out of something. So I love hearing that. What about you, Arlie or Andrew? What are some things that you've had a lot of fun doing?
So for me, fun is food. So I love the food, and you are almost guaranteed that after every event, there's going to be food and good food. One of my favorites is going to get soul food. I've never had it before, and I've been missing out my whole entire life. That was amazing. But also during finals week, I remember Brown brought a different treat every day. So there was cereal one day, chips the other day, cookies the other day, and we just go in the basement, just so much food. And so that was just great. So that was fun for me.
One thing I thought of that was really fun, I'm a big rollerblader, and the old RD Jordan, he's a big rollerblader, and we used to like have these, what was this called? Skate Hall instead of Scott Hall, and we got people like rollerblading or longboarding or whatever just around Holland, and that was a really fun thing we used to do, and when it got nice out in the spring, so.
Serious topics. I've never been down in the basement of Scott Hall without smiles. Even the deepest of conversations, there's always somebody cracking a joke or easing the tension. And it's not out of disrespect, it's out of complete respect of enjoying each other and enjoying the company. I can't think of a better place to want to hang out than the basement of Scott Hall, because people care about each other. And once again, I think I feel like I belong there, right? Not a Phelps Scholar, but when I walk in that basement and I know some of those faces, it's, hey, Lance, so great you're here, right? Sit down, we're having a conversation. Let's play some pool, let's play some ping pong, let's eat some pizza. There's always food in the basement of Scott Hall, like you said, Arlie. So I just love that there's always smiles that come along with the Phelps Scholars program as well.
So I'd love to hear from you all, our students, and just kind of the first question that we have in our Q&A is just if you'd be willing to share a little bit about what it's like to be a person of color at Hope as a student.
I can go first. So just like Amadou was saying, I came from a place that was very diverse. I was surrounded by Latina women my whole entire life. So coming here, definitely a culture shock. You can definitely find yourself being one of the two women of color or just students of color on every class, especially the STEM related fields. I see myself as often being the only one, which is incredibly terrifying. You often feel lonely. So it's after those classes that I go back to Scott where I can feel myself again, if that makes sense. So it's hard, there's no doubt about it. But like I mentioned before, Phelps Scholars is one of the ways that you can find yourself and a place you can call home.
Yeah, to kind of echo what Arlie was saying, everything she said is true. It is definitely a culture shock, especially if you've been in a diverse setting of some sort for any time in your life. It's definitely a culture shock. But I think at the same time, it does give you an opportunity, and it's not necessarily a student's job to be an educator, but it does give you the job to kind of be that sort of intellectual leader amongst your peers as when it comes to things like race or culture and diversity. It kind of puts you, if you're willing to be in the passenger seat, to kind of educate and inform people who were sometimes just unintentionally ignorant, because I think that is the case with a lot of Hope students. They're not necessarily trying to be ignorant of racial or cultural matters, but it's just that they've lived in the same bubbles their entire lives, so they don't necessarily know better. So I think being a student of color, it can be tough, but at the same time, if you are one who wants to be a leader of some sort in terms of educating your peers and starting those difficult conversations, it definitely puts you in that position.
And as a former student of color myself, and now an employee of the college who is a person of color, I think anytime that I'm talking to somebody who is coming from some sort of minority culture background and they're thinking about higher education, my number one piece of advice is you have to figure out if this is important to you and it's something that you're considering. You have to figure out where you're going to find that community and those connections at the place that you end up. Because the reality is most of higher education is predominantly white. Most institutions are going to be overwhelmingly predominantly white just based off of statistics. And so when I think about that at Hope College, the thing that, or anywhere, is where are you, excuse me, I had a couple of things open, is where are you going to find that, right? And I'm not meaning for this to be a disingenuous swing back to Phelps Scholars, but at Hope, I think Phelps Scholars is one of those places. And regardless of where you end up, I think that's a really, really important piece. One of the questions is, somebody said they were curious about Latinx students and if there are any international students from Central America. And I cannot speak to what it is to be a Latinx student at Hope, but I can share that yes, there are. So I think this year about 15% of our Phelps Scholars cohort, which is a pretty good percentage, are international students. And we have about 88 students this year, and I think about 6 of those are from who are international students from Central and Latin America. So that's just a few who are in the program, as well as a number of Latina and Latino students from the States in the program as well.
You know, one other thing, Casey, as we think about kind of finding community and being a person of color, you know, one of the wonderful byproducts, although, you know, I think you're pretty intentional about this, is we find that about half of Phelps Scholars end up being in leadership positions, whether that's in residential life or other aspects across campus. So I always love this when I tell my students, hey, as As a student of color, yes, we're at a predominantly white school, but programs like the Phelps Scholars program can really prepare you to be in leadership positions across campus. Once again, the program is only freshman year, meaning you only reside together freshman year in Scott Hall. But as you go out into the general population of Hope, you're really prepared to be leaders across campus, which means for those future generation students who come as students of color, they're going to see a lot of people of color in leadership positions. So when your RA, when your resident assistant is a Latina or an African-American male, and you are, that's engaging and exciting, and you now feel drawn to that. So I'm really impressed by how PSP prepares students and challenges them to go out into leadership positions.
Yeah. And our students are represented in almost every student organization, almost every major. We're 10%, I love this stat. We're like 10 to 12% of the student body, which is a pretty good percentage. We're the largest, other than student athletes, we're the largest group of incoming students committed to any one thing. We're 6% of students who live on campus, but we're over 25% of all the resident assistants, which I think is pretty incredible. And we're over 80% of all the leaders of our multicultural student organization. So I love that. I think that's a reflection of our students. When I talk to professors, and if I meet a new professor and they realize I'm the director of Phelps Scholars, the one story I hear over and over again is, oh, wow, every time I have a Phelps Scholar in class, I'm thinking to myself, gosh, this student's pretty incredible. They're really dynamic. They're really thoughtful. They're incredibly engaging. They ask great questions. They have good feedback. And they say to themselves, oh, I wonder if they're, and inevitably they end up being a Phelps Scholar, right? And so, again, that's a brag on our students. If you're looking for a community of people who are creative and engaging and dynamic and who like to have fun, but who also want to learn and ask serious and important questions, then I think this is a really, really great community. And hopefully you saw that from them, having the chance to hear from them tonight.
Yeah. And so, Casey, I'll challenge you with one more question.
Yeah.
Action steps. Students are
Yes.
starting to apply. Students are starting to commit. What are the action steps to join the Phelps Scholars Program? And can you walk through the application process, the acceptance process, and the commitment process?
Yep. Real quickly, I will say there's a question in the Q&A that's important to me, and I know we're short on time. So I just want to let an individual who asked about disability status in the program that I'll send them an email afterwards. So how to be involved, right, and what to do. So if this is interesting to you, the first thing to do would be you can go to our website, hope.edu/Phelps, and you can apply. It's a short application. I like to say two things. One is we're not looking for the next Pulitzer Prize winner, right? Like, we know there's application fatigue out there. What I want to do is have the chance to hear from you that, yeah, you're mutually interested in this, that this is something you're on board for, and why. And if you demonstrate that, we want you in the program. I will tell you up front, it's not a competitive application. It's an application of commitment and being on board. And so if that's the case, and this is something you want to do, apply. I will say applications this year are up. We're really excited about that. It's really incredible for us to know that people are interested. It's very flattering and honoring. So go ahead and I would encourage you to apply now, especially if you want to have the chance to live in Scott Hall with everybody, with the other students who are in the program. So you can apply, short application, 3 to 4 questions. If you have any questions for us, you can include those on there and we'll get back to you. And then the next step is to commit, right? And so the way that I say it is, even if you're not committed to Hope College yet, if you were to come to Hope College, if you know that you would want to be in the Phelps Scholars Program, complete the commitment form. And then if you decide, after all, Hope just isn't for you, then we'll take your name off of that list. But go ahead and save your seat in the program. And then if you come here, you know that you have that spot. And so we'll cap it at 90 students. Right now, I think we're at about 30-ish applications and about 10 or 12 people committed, which is that's about double of what it was last year at this time. And then that will guarantee your seat in Scott Hall, guarantee your seat in our FYS program, and then we'll meet you at orientation. So, is there anything I missed there, Lance?
I think that's great. Hey, these are the moments, like, make it happen. Tonight, if this is a program that you want to do, apply tonight. Make sure you're looking for those emails, those postcards. And if you have not heard, I think, right, Arlie did her own research, right? Use us as admissions reps. And if you all know who your admissions rep, and even if you don't, call over to our admissions office. We'll connect you, and I'll talk to you personally. Like, just be careful, because I'll talk your ear off about Phelps Scholars. But we want you to apply. We want that class to be full. And I love when Casey started a few years ago, one of the first things he says to me was, Lance, Phelps Scholars needs to be a reason why people choose to come to Hope. It doesn't need to be something that's after the fact. And the reality is, we used to call students only after they committed to Hope and said, hey, you're committed to Hope. Would you like to do this program? Now we're calling and reaching out to students saying, hey, would you like to come to Hope because you want to be involved in the Phelps Scholars program? That is a different mindset, and it's a better mindset. So come join us. And I just can't thank you guys enough. Amadou, Arlie, right? These are the moments too where Andrew, we get proud of our students. Andrew is one of my students. He kind of chuckles when I say that, right? It's like I'm his dad sometimes. But when my students choose to do the Phelps Scholars program, I'm a proud papa. Okay, I'm super happy, and I know that my relationship with them will be deeper, that our conversations will be more engaging. And I also know that people like Andrew and Amadou and Arlie and so many Phelps Scholars will have a direct impact on the future generations of Hope students as well. So we can't thank you guys enough for joining us. Thank you for all those out there who logged in, who are sitting in front of computer screens yet again for another night. We couldn't thank you more for joining us. We're super excited for Hope to be a place that not only you feel welcome, but you feel like you belong. And one of the great ways to do that is join the Phelps Scholars program. So signing off tonight, thank you all. Thanks for all in the background that have Mayor and so many others that are doing this for us. We'll see you again next time. Go Hope.